Welcome to the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable, where authors from all walks of life come together to discuss the trials, tribulations, and triumphs of publishing their books. I'm Alice Stockton Rossini. Join us here every Saturday night at 8 o'clock, or listen to our podcast anytime on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, and PodServe, just to name a few. The Author Roundtable is sponsored by ReaderHouse Online Bookstore, where independent new authors come first. You may remember Peggy English from a book she wrote years ago. It was entitled Real Women Know Football. Well, just in time for the Super Bowl, she's back with more tales of life as the wife of football legend Wayne English in her book, Traveling with the Coach.
Well, I met my husband in about 3 weeks. He said, "You know why I'm going to marry you?" "No, because you're so big and we'll have big sons." And when the first one was born, that was his first job as a head coach. And he pulls up in the bus and gets off the bus and the team's hollering, "Hurry, coach, hurry." He runs up, "What is it? A boy?" "Oh, okay." And and our boys are 6'5". 3 have played pro ball. One's a lawyer and one's a doctor. And they've all been major college football scholarships. But when they were 3 years old, he'd put up a net and he said, "Every time you throw $1 football into the net, it's $1 towards your scholarship."
That's great.
I have been married to him 60 some years, and we have lived all over the world, 8 countries, 3 pro teams, 8 colleges. And my first book was inspired. It was called Real Women Know Football, because women would get mad at me because I would go and sit with the men, because it's more fun after the game's over to hear them talk. And some lady said, "Well, why don't you teach me?" So that's how I wrote the first book. Now, this book, I started writing down all the silly things we've done and turned it into a book.
Give us a little background on your husband, Wally English, for people who may not know.
He's 89 years old, but he coached from the Dolphins. He has a Super Bowl ring. He coached for the Saints and the Lions, 8 colleges. And then in NFL Europe, he won 3 championships. He won the French championship, the Italian championship, and the English championship.
That's amazing. Good for him.
He's coached 9 quarterbacks that made it into the NFL. And when he was with the Dolphins, Shula said to him, "I want you to get me the best quarterback," because he's an offensive coordinator. And that year there were 4, John Elway, Danny Marino, and I can't tell you the other 4. There were 4 really top quarterbacks. And Wally had gone in the meeting. He said, "I want Danny Marino." And the scout said, "Oh, no, he had a terrible senior year. He's been on drugs, blah, blah, blah." And Wally said, "I'm telling you, we want Danny Marino." So he got Danny Marino. Then the same thing happened with Mark Duper, and Shula said, "You better be right." Well, the first day of practice, both of them did terrible. And he came home that night and said to me, "We may not have a job tomorrow, but proof is in the pudding."
So he just had this ability to spot real talent.
Yes, he really did. When he worked for the New Orleans Saints, that's all he did. He went out and got players. People think coaches are big deals. And when we first started coaching, he made $3,300. Well, this 1960, we thought we had all the money in the world.
Wow.
And he, like Billy Belichick, he taught Billy football. And then like 4 or 5 of the assistant coaches, and there's like 3 of his assistant coaches all went on to be head coaches, and they're making millions. I told Wally, I said, "You were in it at the wrong time."
So what kind of experiences do you share in your book?
My favorite story of all is Wally was coaching, and it might have been at BYU, I don't know. And he was going to California for a seminar that he was going to speak on, and he said, "Bring the boys." So I said, "Okay." So I started driving, and we got to Winnemucca, Nevada, and it was late, and I thought, "Oh my Lord, we better stop for the night." And we went in, and they said, "I'm sorry, we have 1 room left and only has 1 bed in it." I said, "I don't care. The boys, we'll sleep anywhere." Now these are teenagers, 16, 17.
Oh, geez.
and a couple of younger ones. And so they all went out and got food and blah, 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 and came back. And the next morning, we all got up and got in the car and started for California. And it came on the radio. Hotel Winnemucca closed down. It was a house of ill repute.
Oh, no.
And I had my boys running around.
You had no idea?
No idea. It was the only hotel. And then when we went to Italy, to Palermo, Sicily, Wally coached for the Dolphins, and Super Bowl, they always had a lot of people in, and he met a lot of the European people back then. This was 1998. They were just starting football over there. Mm-hmm. And one of the men said, would you ever consider coming to Europe to coach? And he said, well, sure. So we got a call, and the man said, is a Dakota there? And I said, I knew it wasn't, so I handed the phone to Wally, and he said, well, sure, I'd love to do that. And at that time, we were living in Louisville, Kentucky, and there was two Italians who had a fabulous restaurant, and they happened to be from Palermo, Sicily. So we went down and talked to them, and they took us to the professor at U of L who taught the Italian language, and they wrote up the contract. And so Wally and my son Danny flew to Sicily, Palermo, and they met him at the plane, the Italian people, and took him right to practice. And Danny said they got there. The field was a dirt field with pebbles, and they were so excited to have football. And then when I took the rest of the boys, we got on the plane. Well, first of all, we flew to Rome and got off, and there were all these men with machine guns. Well, in the United States, we didn't have anything like that. Right. So we get on Alitalia to go to Palermo, and all of these Italian people with their chickens and their food, and they couldn't have been nicer. Let us feed you. Can we feed? Do you want food? The whole entire time we were there, and we didn't know money-wise. When we went there, they said, we'll pay you so much and give you a car to drive around, and a place to live. And so we did. And but no food for money. And when you have that many people, it cost a lot of money. So I had to call my dad and say, will you send me some money? And he sent me a check for $500. And I went into the bank, and you had to go through armed guards. Mm-hmm. And then I gave them the check, and they looked at it. My father was a judge, and they said, well, you'll have to come back tomorrow to get your money. And I said, oh, okay. And I walked out and left the check, never gave it a thought. And Wally said, well, you mean you gave him the check and you didn't get any money? But the next day I went back and I got $500 worth of lira. Well, you'd have thought I was a millionaire. I had to carry it out in a bag.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, but we truly have had a lot of fun times. When Wally coached at BYU, it's all, a Mormon community. Right. And so if he wanted to get a beer, we had to go out of the community, because if you said you worked for BYU, you didn't do that. And right. Then the doctor of the team would come to our house, and he'd have his drink and his Coke and smoke, and then he'd leave. The first half of the book is all about living in Europe. We coached Spain, Italy, Hungary, Serbia. We loved it. I loved that better than coaching in the United States, because they were so thrilled to have somebody with Wally's knowledge. But I mean, literally, Wally worked 12, 14 hours a day, 7 days a week coaching. And over there, you'd work 3 days, and then you'd have 3 days off and play the game on Sunday. And so we'd have a car, and we got to drive, all over all of Europe. Then the second part of the book is the college and the pro teams. It's funny. The silly things that we did. I can remember when Wally took the job with Don Shula at Miami, and Mrs. Shula called, and she couldn't have been nicer. Oh, Florida's great, but you're going to get tired of it, and you'll have company. And she was right. And I had a baby at that time, and the baby was born, and Wally left to go to the Dolphins. But I was in the hotel. He had me come down to see about a house. So I took the baby, and we flew down, and I was in my room, And a knock came at the door, and there was this woman standing there with a moo-moo and a big basket. And I thought it was the maid. And I said, "Oh, if you'll give me 5 minutes, I'll get out of here." And she said, "I am Dorothy Shula." I don't think she ever forgave me for that. But
Oh, well, how
I
could you
didn't
know?
know.
Yeah.
Coaching is people have no idea what a football coach. My favorite thing when we coach for the Detroit Lions, Raymond Berry, who's a very famous football player, he and Wally became very good friends. And he'd pick Wally up at 6 in the morning and they'd get home maybe at 12 at night. But he would say when the men went in the hotel room, went in the hotel, of course, all the women are waiting. And he'd tell the team, "Eyes to the sky." And one of the coaches who had coached Joe Namath said that he used to do bed check, and he was going around, and there was Joe down in the bar with 3 or 4 women, and he went to check his room, and he said there was a woman waiting for him in his room.
Oh, geez.
I mean, truthfully, like poor Don Shula, I would feel so sorry. We'd go out to dinner, and he'd take the staff, and women would come up, "Can I have a kiss? Could I have my picture with you?"
Oh,
And
boy.
you know, I actually have been in the hotel room with my husband, and the phone rang and said, "Is Coach English there?" And I said, "Well, who's calling, please?" And she said, "Well, I'm down in the bar, and I thought he might want to meet me." And I said, "Well, this is his wife. I'll ask." And she hung up.
That's great. Well, listen,
Uh,
if you had that much success with your first book and it was self-published, I don't see why you can't have similar success with this one, really.
Yeah, I did a telephone interviews 3 and 4 times every week, and got to be on The View and Good Morning America, and then here in Louisville, I got to be on those shows. Whatever it
I would
takes.
think if you reached out to your local TV, local radio stations, that they're going to pick up on this because I'm sure they know who you are.
Well, I doubt that.
Now, I'm sure the local paper knows who your husband is, and why wouldn't they want to do an article on you,
Well,
you
he's
know?
89, and he's been out of coaching probably 20 years, and he was a great coach. He won every place he ever coached. In fact, when we were at Pittsburgh, we beat Penn State 2 years in a row, and Joe Paterno called him to come for an interview, and the head coach of Pittsburgh said, "If you go, you better get the job." So Wally didn't go. But no, he's won every place he's ever coached except the Detroit. I mean, when I say win, I'm talking major wins, Pro
Right.
Bowls and Super Bowls and all that. But they didn't do that well at Detroit, and they didn't do that well at the University of Kentucky. But other than that, I can't tell you how many bowl games, bowl rings, bowl watches, and
Wow.
yeah, I wouldn't trade it for all the money in the world. We've moved 50 times, and I don't care.
Wow.
It's fun.
Well, listen, I wish you the best of luck, and I hope I talk to you again soon, Peggy.
All right.
Thank you. The title of Alex Russo's book speaks volumes. I Heard You, Speak to Me. It's about a woman in the medical profession who finds herself in a sociopathic relationship, a situation more than one author on this show has explored because it's more common than some might think.
I think every woman probably in their life has been in a sociopathic narcissistic relationship. They just might not know it. What I wrote in the back of my book, because they always ask you in the back of your book to say something about the author, and I think it kind of hits home. For many years, I heard all my girlfriends or friends, men and women, complain about searching for love or for a partner. We may be over drinks or cocktails at parties, at tears, or at weddings, like when they throw the bouquet. Oh, I don't want to be the one that catches that bouquet. I've already had a failed marriage, 1 or 2 or whatever. And they still keep asking the same question. Am I going to meet the right one? Or I just had a horrible relationship, or I just ended a horrible relationship. And, when am I ever going to find the right person? And I can't believe I'm going through this again. And for me, I think it's always like, oh, why don't you take a step back and, relive that relationship? And who did you turn to for help? And I think the message is always, you need a higher power. You need to take a step back and listen to God. But not everybody believes in God. And that was the part that I wanted to get across, especially when my publicist wanted to put out my release. There was a lot of God, a lot of Lord. And I'm like, well, not everybody believes in God. Not everybody believes in the Lord. So some people believe in a higher power. So whatever it is you believe in, take a step back and trust that there's somebody else there to help guide you through this. And that's kind of my message.
You know, some people might call it intuition.
Right? Yeah.
When you have a feeling that you
Yeah.
need to do something, that feeling is real, you're not making it up in your head. Because a lot of times we ask ourselves, am I just making this up? Am I just trying to convince myself? Or is there really a message coming through here?
You know, the sixth sense, you know, you've heard of the sixth sense. I have a sixth sense. One of my former husbands said to me, you have 7. And you know, because I am in medicine, he used to say, sometimes you don't always know the right thing to do, but you always know not to do the wrong thing.
Well, good for you.
Yeah. So, but I think my book is, you know, it's a love story. Everybody wants to read a love story, right? Everybody wants to see a woman find her love. I made it short because not everybody has a lot of time in this busy world today to read a long book. One of my friends that recently read it, she goes, it was great. She's like, I read it on the way to Hawaii. She goes, I could get through that book on the way to Hawaii. And I loved it. And she goes, and I didn't have to like get into, you know, 5 chapters to like, okay, what is this story about?
Right.
She goes, it like right away grabbed me and embraced me, and I loved it. And she goes, it was captivating. It was a story about a woman that fell passionately in love with a handsome doctor, and he captured her heart, but he took her on a roller coaster of a ride while she was studying in the medical field, and she fell deeply in love with him. But then, boy, did he challenge her life and changed her life. Not always in a good way. And she had a really hard time. She struggled a lot. And the only person that she could really turn to was God. And he is the one that brought her through this. And that's why it's called I Heard You Speak to Me.
Give me an example of how he challenged her.
He lied a lot about things, but he was so charming and convincing that she believed him. You know, for instance, one of the times he told her that he happened to see a credit card on the counter that she had just gotten. And this is when she was in medical school. And he said, you know, it'd be really nice if you put my name on that credit card, because just in case I need it for emergencies. And she said, well, that's what it's for. It's for emergencies. But she loved him so much, she trusted him. So she put his name on the account. Oh. And it was for $25,000. And this is when she was in medical school. She had a daughter that was in high school. And she lived separately from her daughter because she was going to medical school, but she would go home on the weekends to see her daughter. And her daughter was a junior in high school and wanted to have a bus for their prom. And they thought it was a really good idea to have a bus that would take them to and from the prom. And then if by chance they happened to drink a little bit of alcohol, they would be safe on the bus. And she says, Mom, this will be a really good way. We can make some money and we'll be safe. And so the mom thought about it and says, well, you know what? Okay, let's do it. And she was, but I need your credit card to put a deposit on the bus. So she gave her the credit card number and said, okay, this is fine. So the next day, daughter calls her frantic saying, Mom, your credit card didn't go through.
Oh.
And she's like, what? I've never even used it. It's $25,000 of credit. I don't understand. So she calls the bank. She's like, it's all been used. She's like, what do you mean it's all been used? She says, yes, there's a man came in and used it all. He took cash.
Oh, boy.
So that was one example of how she trusted him And he, when he got home that night, she questioned him and he said, well, he needed it for a business adventure. He promised he would pay it back.
Oh, God.
No, that was just one of many examples of things that he did to her. But she trusted him. She still continued to trust him because she loved him. He was handsome, charming, brilliant, because he helped her a lot when she was in medical school. So that was the other thing that she was drawn to. His mind, he was brilliant.
Right. It's so sad that I can't tell you how many women I've known throughout my life who were so desperate for love, who, gave men money, gave them their stocks, turned over, trust funds, and, because the guy said he was going to invest it and, ended up losing her life savings. This happened to one friend. I mean, it's so sad that we need to be loved so badly because, we don't love ourselves.
Right. Well, she trusted him, and she, what could she do after that? She'd lost the $25,000. Luckily, her daughter ended up getting the bus because her mom gave her the money to pay for the bus. So the grandmother. So it all worked out. But yeah, she was embarrassed.
So it's this kind of shenanigans that goes on in the book, and at the end we find out whether she comes to her senses or not, right?
Well, she ends up marrying him, unfortunately.
Oh boy! But the book doesn't end there, right?
No, oh no. They go into business together. She ends up being with him for 15 years.
Wow, that's a long time.
It's a long time because she really did love him. But what do sociopaths? What is their makeup? They're good looking. They're charming. They're brilliant. They draw you in, and then when they're done with you, they're done. There's no remorse at all.
Well, you got a good message here.
If a woman is in a sociopathic relationship or a narcissistic relationship, that maybe she'll read my book and say, hey, I think that might be me. I need to get out of this relationship. That's one thing. The second thing is, because the title of the book is I Heard You Speak to Me, it's about God, listening to God or a higher power or whatever you believe in, that you'll take time to take a step back and listen. And those are the two things that I hope that people will get out of the book. And then the other thing is, encourage people that if you have thought about writing a book, do it. It's not as hard as you think, or at least I didn't think it was. Just do it. If you're passionate about something, you want to get a message across, go ahead and do it. It can be very cathartic also. It just, sometimes the words just start flowing out before you know it. Before I knew it, I had 50 pages written.
Well, I hope there's more where this came from. And thanks so much for talking to me.
Yeah, thank you so much. Really appreciate it, Alice.
Shout out to Bekka Hunsperger, who fights with insurance companies every day to make sure patients get the coverage they need for surgery. Thank you. And you are here to talk not about that, but your book entitled The Tattered Veil. When do you find time to write?
Between patients.
Between patients, you're writing?
I am. I write all the time. I can be driving down the road and something strikes and I say, hey, Siri, make a note. And if somebody was to pull me over and say, I have to look through your phone, I would be in jail. There are so many things. I have how to dispose of a body at sea where it won't come back.
Why do you know that?
Because it's going to be in one of my next books. I have 15 books in the works right this minute. So
how long have you been writing?
20 years.
20 years, 15 books. This is your first one published.
Actually, this is the second time this first book has been published. It has been a long journey. I wrote the book. It's based on true events. Two very close people to me begged me to write their story and fictionalize it. So I put myself in the book to make it authentic because I have to know my characters. So I put myself in the book as one of the characters, or part of one of the characters. And it has been an extremely harrowing journey, if you will.
So what happened the first time you tried to get it published?
Well, it was published, but my publishing company, they did me dirty. He kept all my royalties, didn't even give me a copy of my own book, and disappeared.
Oh,
Closed
no.
up shop and disappeared. Yeah. So
So you tried Paige.
I did. And whenever I say I tried Paige, I had talked to the guy that I reached out to the first time, and I talked to him, and then a year later he reached out and he said, I'm just touching base. And I said, yeah, well, I'm almost done. And I had been revamping the book and redoing it because the first guy didn't even edit. He put a disclaimer on it, says, caution, this unedited, it's raw. It's, we didn't want to damage the integrity of the book,
What
which
a bunch
was
of
just
BS.
yeah, just because he was lazy. So I really wanted to take it a different way, and it's not so crude. The girl's name is Sophia, and she's a young girl who experiences trauma early in life by losing her mother. Then her dad remarries, and it's a family full of monsters, predatory monsters. There's an uncle, a brother, and a cousin who all take advantage of her and molest her and violate her in unspeakable ways. And it's just a story about her struggles and her lifelong abuse, and how she realizes that she has to end those patterns before she succumbs to depression and before it's too late. So it's just kind of a bumbling, stumbling way through her life, and how she depends on her womanly wiles, I guess, to get through life and stay safe. But whenever she realizes that a lot of it is men actually using her for sex, that she realized, well, maybe I should straighten up. Maybe I should just, stop messing with men. And she ends up meeting the love of her life, and life goes on.
And this is based on a true story.
Yes, it's the culmination of 3 different lives. So it's not really just one straight path. It's kind of floats around. I blended them into one character so that it wouldn't be too confusing, because it's almost as though she has a split personality. She goes through all of this abuse, and it's a wonder she's sane, which, a lot of people would kind of say that what she does throughout the book is not sane. She's, gets involved very quickly with relationships and men and things. And it's all based on her history of being abused. She just thinks that that's how life is. That's how you get through.
Does she ever get help?
No, not really. She just leans on herself a lot.
What's your message in this book? What do you want us to learn?
If you rely on yourself, you can get through anything pretty much. At least that's what I saw. Okay, my 2 cousins were the ones that I based this on, because they begged me to write their story, and then one of them passed. And that's what I envisioned for them.
So all of this abuse is going on. She never tells anybody. She keeps it to herself.
She tells her parents, and they tell her that the very first time that it happened, she tells her parents, and they tell her that she's just making it up. So if she can't trust her parents, she just doesn't tell anybody.
Who abused her the first time? How old was she?
13, I think it was, and it was an uncle for the first one.
Okay, and her parents don't believe her.
No, because they're newlyweds, and they think that she's just trying to keep cause trouble.
Okay, so what happens? What happens to this person?
Well, she just goes on with life. She moves out early from home and immediately gets into a violent relationship with a husband that cheats. And so she cheats, and it's back and forth cheating. I'll cheat on you, you cheat on me. And she just figures that this is how life is played. And she learns very quickly to adapt. She jumps in with both feet into relationships without really taking the time to get to know people.
Okay. Now, are you say you've got 15 books that you want to publish. Are they all based around this story, or does this story? No. Do we come to a conclusion here? Is she able to survive somehow?
Yeah, she does survive. She ends up getting married to a man that she believes is the love of her life, and they live happily ever after. Is basically the end of that book.
So when did you write this book? Was this a while ago, or?
It's been the first time I wrote this book it spanned between the late 80s and early 2000s. And 2009, I revamped it and worked on it a little here and a little there. And whenever my cousin passed, my other cousin, her sister, insisted that we move forward with it. And so I really got buckled down and got it out last April.
Okay. What does that mean, the tattered veil?
Well, she feels like, I guess the underlying message there under the title would be that, marriage is not always easy. It's dirty, and it's, hard and tattered. And, if you're the bride, you gotta be strong.
So even after all of this abuse that she endures, her marriage is less than perfect.
Yeah.
How are you telling people about it?
A lot of social media, word of mouth. I have Instagram and TikTok and Facebook and LinkedIn, and I have a website where I have a few stories, just regular everyday short stories posted. This book is not the one that I want to be my breakout book. This one I just needed to get out there and get off my chest, get it done for the sake of getting my feet wet, basically.
So how you feeling now?
Empowered, because this was a hard book to write because of the topic. And I don't like to constrain myself to one genre. So I have a couple of rom-coms. I have a thriller. I have a mystery, all kinds of different genres that I've got started and in the works. I've got one thriller at the moment that's I'm focusing on with a book coach. So.
Well, thanks so much for taking the time to talk to me.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank
you.
You have a great day and keep up the good work.
Thank you so much.
You should write a book about what you do every day, what these insurance companies do to you.
I have a book in the works. It's about the tumultuous relationship between a surgeon's office, and a hospital.
Good.
Yes. So.
All right. I'm looking forward to that one, Bekka.
Yes.
All right. You have a great day.
Thank you so much. You too, Alice. Bye-bye.
Brad A. LaMar is a man of many ideas, and while he keeps assignments interesting for his 7th and 8th grade science students, he finds his mind is always on the next book. This one he started in 2003. It is entitled Angler Island, The Crystal Cavern, a follow-up to his first book, Angler Island.
I really didn't think of myself as that great of a writer, to be honest about it, until my senior year. I get this letter from the Washington Post that says they wanted me to come do an internship.
What?
Yeah. And I'm like, where's this coming from? So I think my English teacher, my senior year, submitted some work of mine, and they got a hold of me, but I didn't go because I was just about to go to college, and I had academic scholarships, but I also had a baseball scholarship.
Oh.
So I was playing baseball, and I couldn't go do that. So I don't know what would have been.
The Washington Post or baseball?
Yeah.
When you're 18.
Yeah,
right?
Baseball sounds a whole lot better.
It sounded real good. So then you become a teacher. What made you decide to write a book?
I gave an assignment. So the kids I taught astronomy first 9 weeks, then human biology second 9 weeks. So I gave them a project on astronomy about making a planet. Then for a connection piece in human biology, I had them create an alien that lived, like the dominant life form that lived on that planet. And so I wanted to know what was a day in the life of an alien on their planet. And so I wrote one. I wrote a story and I read it to the kids just as an example. And the kids were like, "Is that a published book?" I'm like, "No, I just wrote it for you." And every class said that, like for years, like a couple years in a row. And so I thought maybe I should try. And so I sent it out to some agents, and you don't get too many replies back then. This is when it's snail mail. And one agent did reply, I really like the way you write, but to be honest, if you're going to get published in today's world in children's book, you either need to already be published or be a celebrity. And so she said, if you really want to get published, write a novel. And so I did. I wrote the first Angler Island. And I got an agent for that, but it didn't kind of go anywhere. But I was still writing in the meantime. And I wrote my first Celtic Mythos book, and that caught the attention of a publisher in North Carolina. And so story there is I got 4 books from that, because she was like, is this a series? And I said, do you want it to be a series? And she said, yeah. I said, yep, it's a series. And so I made it a series. But then that one story about the alien, it actually got published last year too, or this year, I should say.
What made you go with Paige?
I just wanted something a little bit different. I wanted to try something different. I already had done the traditional publishing. They keep a larger percentage of the royalties. So I wanted to try, see what it was like to deal with a different type of company. But I keep all my rights. So I have all the rights to printing, screenplays, and whatever else.
So your experience with Paige, how did that go for you?
Good. I thought everybody's real friendly. I like the portal that's there. So it just kind of keeps me on the timeline of what needs to happen. We got the process down.
Great. All right. So what's Angler Island about?
I kind of come up with random ideas all the time. I have for years. I just came up with an idea that what if there was a company that tries to move all their employees to an island. And this island has tons of resources, and it's like this beautiful place. But then there's this crazy phenomena that traps everyone there. And so what I chose was the idea of a sea tornado that had this crazy power. And so it would sink ships, and there's no escape from the island. Even though there's a subplot of obviously someone's running the island and keeping people there. Why? Because they brought in all these employees who are genius scientists and inventors and creatives. And so they're basically turning a profit from these people without them knowing it.
Oh.
So that's kind of the backstory in it, where the main characters are kind of coming of age. It's a coming of age story. It's just a lot of stories are. So, but yeah, so it's kind of fun. There's a lot of science in there because I keep science. A lot of inventions, a lot of. I kind of thought up the idea of a tablet, like a touchscreen tablet, in that time. This was back in like 2003. Before they came out, but they came out, so I can't take credit for it. So I had to change what that was like when I went back and redid it. And so yeah, this is kind of one of these ideas. I have conversations with my publisher now. I'll say, okay, I got to pitch you an idea, and so don't think any worse of me, because I just come up with these strange things. And the main character is a kid named Evan, and he's actually named after my son. And so the first one, he's kind of discovering. So the first book, he kind of discovers a plot that he thinks someone in there is trying to kill his father, who's a scientist. There's some twists and turns, so it's a little bit of mystery, definitely adventure in the series. So we get to book 2. Evan has already kind of met a girl there named Taylor, and it just so happened that a friend had came with him, and so they got a little friend group and that sort of thing. Well, someone new comes to the island who's about the same age and kind of disrupts the boyfriend-girlfriend aspect of Evan and Taylor's relationship.
Uh-oh.
So Taylor, who's the girlfriend, starts to question, what is Evan really right for her, and all the things like you would go through as a teenager.
Right.
Yeah. And so, but there's of course more nefarious dealings with it. Is he who is this new kid, Ryan? Is he who he says he is as he comes into the island? And so we eventually get to a point where we find out the energy source, and this is pretty early on in the book, so I'm not spoiling anything, are these mysterious crystals from this cave that they don't know the true science of just yet, but they're trying to figure that out. And so that becomes an important piece. I don't want to give away too much, So one of the things I would like to stress in it is the science fiction aspect of it, that there's a lot of gadgetry and like medical enhancements. I don't want to say like performance enhancing drugs, but like things they're a little bit different than what you would see as in reality, as that's pretty harmful to people. But these are like totally different discoveries, and they're finding out different ways to grow crops in certain conditions and grow them faster and bigger and better. And it covers a wide gambit of science stuff. So it's an important part of it, is that the whole reason they're there is because they're a scientific community. But the reason they're trapped is because someone is trapping them, and it all comes back down to greed.
Oh, what a surprise. So
yes,
it's trying to get something out of these people for nothing and basically enslaving them.
Correct. They don't know it, but that's what's happened to them.
Wow.
And I got to tell you, I was on the verge of writing book 3 for it, and I was going to have something similar to a virus coming out, but that all changed with COVID.
Right.
I said, nope, not writing that book.
So it's the Angler series is 2 books.
Yes.
Okay. So I'm assuming you have a following?
Yeah. I do some book signings. Did one here not too long ago, but all social media and people follow that way. So, but getting it out there through LinkedIn, I've got a pretty good YouTube following at this point. Okay. So I'll advertise, put things out there on there. But, I don't just do that. I also show some of my own self, like experiments in class with my students, because they love being on YouTube. They sign off at the beginning of the year that their students allowed to be photographed or posted in video.
That's great. Okay.
And then I also disable comments. No one can comment on them.
Oh, good. Okay.
I don't need any weirdos out there.
Right. So it's you're just kind of cruising along here then, Brad.
Yeah, so far.
All right, Brad, listen, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate the conversation.
We hope you enjoyed this edition of the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable, where authors from all walks of life come together to discuss the trials, tribulations, and triumphs of publishing their books. I'm Alice Stockton Rossini. We hope to see you back here every Saturday night at 8 o'clock, or listen to our podcast anytime on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, and PodServe, just to name a few. The Author Roundtable is sponsored by ReaderHouse Online Bookstore, where independent new authors come first.